Hi, I'm Larry Dignan with ZDNet, and we're here with Mark Haraki. He is CEO of the Impact Africa Network, and we're going to talk about fundraising, starting startups in Nairobi, and just how to get going and building ownership. Hi, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Larry. Good to be here.
So I guess walk me through kind of the backstory. You're a Silicon Valley veteran, and then you started this project in Africa, basically to encourage ownership and creatives to get going. And you got some AI classes in there. You got a lot of moving parts there. So I guess just walk us, for starters, just through the backdrop.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Nairobi, where I'm sitting right now, and spent, almost close to 18 years in Silicon Valley, working in that ecosystem, in the tech ecosystem there. And in 2018, after some kind of life evolutionary processes, I made the decision to move back home and just immerse myself in the economic development challenge. It was clear that there was a big need to build capacity around innovation and entrepreneurship. We have an abundance of young talent, the youngest continent pretty much globally. But there is such a big chasm between that young talent and the ability to actually put something out that can scale, right? We don't have a background of doing that, a tradition of doing that, significant cultural and structural issues that keep our young people, it's basically a chasm between I'm a young person who's educated, coming out of a local university, and the expectation now, today, everybody's being told that they should get into entrepreneurship. And there is no backdrop for that. There is no history of that. The type of, you hear that, the developing world is very entrepreneurial, but the type of entrepreneurship is really survival entrepreneurship or lifestyle entrepreneurship. But what's needed in the innovation world is people who can build scalable projects, right? I mean, that's what I was exposed to in Silicon Valley, and that's what changes the world and changes economies. And so that's what I came back to do.
So right now you're raising funding, and you sort of have this micro donation model, which I think is pretty appealing. I guess walk me through the model in terms of what you need to build up financially for it to scale.
Yeah, so first of all, as soon as people hear startups, they think, okay, venture. That's the funding model that's associated with startups. And the reality is we exist in a parallel universe to the US and to Silicon Valley, to be more specific. And what is needed here first is bottoms up capacity building, right? You actually have to get the talent ready to actually start to be able to actually build these projects. And so if you think about the way that works in the developed world, you've got Stanford, right? You've got Harvard, you've got MIT, and you've got people who come from generations of business ownership and have been exposed to scale and the way things are done in that part of the world. Over here, majority of people don't come from entrepreneurial backgrounds, right? They're being, socialized to go get a job. So if you graduate from a university, the expectation is you'll go get a job as quickly as you can so you can support your family, right? So the data here says that one person who's got a salary supports 4, maybe even 6, maybe 8 people, depending on one income. And so the idea is how quickly can I finish my education and go get that income? And so very risk averse society, just because there are no safety nets. And so that creates a certain mindset in terms of how people approach the decisions they make and the opportunities they can see. And if you think about the average person coming out of Stanford or Harvard, or those are the folks who actually go on to build great things, and the person coming out of a local university, they may have the same raw horsepower in terms of talent, but the opportunity horizon is very different. The option landscape is very different. So what begins to happen? You find people who come. What's happening right now is you find people coming from the West, right? Like students from those universities who come here and they can't believe the amount of opportunity there is. And you talk to this equivalent person over here, and they can't see it just because they've not been exposed to it. It doesn't compute. So how do you get that mindset to this other side where they can actually start to appreciate the importance of the opportunity? And then with that, how do you impart to them the skills, execution skills. Because people come out and they wait to be told what to do, because that's the whole education system. You've been fed with this hosepipe of just lecturers. And so when you come out, it's like, okay, I'm supposed to figure things out for myself. And that's the 21st century. It's a figuring it out century. I mean, it's always been that way, but now it's much more that way. And so you have deer in the headlight moments with these young people. And so you have 10 people applying for this one job posting, and the ratio is just, it's ridiculous between the job opportunities and the mass of people trying to apply for jobs. So it's a glut. And so you look at that and you're like, okay, this needs a different solution. And so it's not so much, our funding model is not so much about, we're not at the point where we can take venture. We're at the point where we first need to build capacity. We first need to create an environment where we can actually develop these ideas to the point where they can attract venture money, right? So we're way south of where you can actually get to that type of investable situation. And so what we are is a nonprofit. So we created a nonprofit to enable that capacity building and that raw bottoms up. Let's build people and let's build projects at the same time, right? Because if you try to do the venture model, it just falls. It doesn't work because it's too involving, it's too difficult, it's too unknowable. I mean, entrepreneurship is unknowable as it is, but when you're building people and building projects at the same time, that's a whole different ball of wax.
So the nonprofit model, do you think it's the way you're setting it up, is it more about kind of replacing that generational wealth, or
Precisely.
just providing some kind of safety net so folks can take a chance?
Precisely. That's it. That's it. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to create this room and space for that knowledge and that the mindset shift to happen and the skill sets to develop. And you can't do that in a vacuum or in a classroom. You've got to do that. It's most practicable when you're working on projects. So what we do is we do three things. I call it, we develop innovation leaders through the process of actually working on projects, which are really early stage startups. And we build community, because we know we need all the resources we can get, from knowledge to funding to just even the public sector to support all the efforts that we're doing. So we understand we need to build an infrastructure that will allow these projects to scale and these people to scale into those projects. So we're building the future, literally, in terms of we've got to build the jobs that these people can actually grow into, right? So the expectation that you'll find a maverick entrepreneur, you will find some of them. There's some amazing entrepreneurs out here, but the scale at which we need to do it is just too demanding for us to wait for that to happen. And so we're kind of basically bootstrapping it. It's a combination, I would say, maybe of Y Combinator and Stanford University, because you've got to build the people and you've got to build the structure, and you've got to put everything together at once. And so that's what it is. It's replacing that generational wealth through a funding model that's patient, that's not going to be looking over and saying, why are you doing it this way? Why don't you do it this way? And the reality of the matter is, we don't have capital here. We don't have risk capital over here yet, right? And so most of the risk capital that's coming in is coming in from Silicon Valley, from the West. And so people will apply those models and will want to actually it's their money, so they want to control the situation and kind of replicate what they've seen elsewhere, and that doesn't translate typically. So yeah, I mean, we have to find ways to get to the point where we can now take capital when something is much more viable and we have much more control of the destiny of the situation, if you will.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when you were talking about those schools, I mean, the first thing pops into I have a kid that's almost going into college. So you say Harvard, Stanford, I think student debt. Like it's the first thing that comes to my head.
Right.
So how do you think your model, well, actually, let's just go into the funding part. So you have some, big name Silicon Valley CEOs have kind of stepped up as founders. And then you kind of have this model where it's $20 a month or $50 a month, or I think it goes to $100, where it's sort of a tax deductible, but it's almost like a social goods subscription is kind of the way I thought of it. I guess just walk us through that and, how that small donation, can scale over time.
Yeah. So it's basically the way you described it. We call it the micro donation program, right? and it's like, it works just like Netflix, right? $20 a month is what we ask. Some people can step up to higher amounts, whatever they feel is they're comfortable with. But we're looking to scale that because, you can, the advantage we have here is, for want of a better term, low cost talent. The cost is the effort to actually get that talent game ready, right? Or effective, right? So with a little amount of capital can go a long way here, right? And so that's how we think about that. And so when somebody says, okay, $20, I can give $20 to this project, what impact can it have? When we scale that up to 500 people, that's $10,000 a month. With $10,000 a month, we can run a team of probably, I would say, 25 innovation fellows, we call them, and a leadership team of probably 3 people, and then we can really drive. So we launched in January 2019. And so in that time, we have provided the opportunity to about 25 people, well, including now, that's close to 30, right? And our team right now is 25, right, in full stack. And our running costs are not that high. I mean, I'm kind of giving my life away to this because, if you take away what I earn, which is not much at all compared to what my lifestyle was like in Silicon Valley and what I was earning over there, we can go so far. But we need to be able to bring that next level kind of leadership talent on board as well, because I can only do so much, right? And so I need to kind of hire the next level of engineering, leader and marketing, so they can work on projects and all the different skill areas that you need. So yeah, that $20 a month goes a long way. And fortunately, we've been fortunate because I knew that people in Silicon Valley, I know the spirit of that place. Deep down, we have the structural issues, but they're amazing people over there, right? And I knew that they would get this. And so we started a fundraising program called the Founders Challenge, the 100 Founders Challenge. And I knew that once they understood what we were doing, they'll be like, I get it. I'm just going to write you a check because I believe what you're doing, because somebody believed in me and they helped me along the way. So it's that give back thing that really makes Silicon Valley take over. That is an amazing thing. So I knew that would happen. And so we have the 100 Founders Challenge for people who want to write bigger checks. So for example, we have folks like Aaron Levy at Box. We have Michael Siebel at Y Combinator. We have Jeff Dean, who heads Google AI. All of them have joined that program, and they give 4 or 5 figure checks, which has been really helpful. But I really believe in this $20 a month thing, right? That is, for us, that helps us to move forward with so much confidence because so much effort goes into fundraising. So it's hard to fundraise in Silicon Valley. Imagine fundraising from Africa. It takes so much effort just to get us to where we are today. And so I believe this program, if anybody who has who understands what we're doing, it's a no-brainer. It's like, wow, for $20, I can help change the African narrative, because that's our moniker. That's what we do. So that's what that's about.
Okay. How do you think this would apply to, a project in the US? Like, could this be replicated?
I think so. I really believe, because at the end of the day, what is this about? This is about activating, in our case, young talent, creating an environment and a structure that can take people and shift their focus, give them the space, the time, and the resources, knowledge resources, the safety net, if you will, right, to take off or to actually work on projects and to learn how to execute. A lot of people will hear what we do and say, okay, so do you take entrepreneurs with the ideas? We don't do that. We actually just take young, raw talent and say, there are market opportunities that we need to go after. And let's focus on execution. So you can learn how to execute. You can learn how to think. You can learn how to become a leader. And so I really believe this can work anywhere in the world where there's a need, where there is an abundance of young talent that's hungry and opportunities and problems to be solved. If you find the right mix and somebody in the middle who's passionate about that, and there are people all over the world who want to create change, who will give themselves over to that, this would work amazingly well. So a lot of things also people ask is, they wonder, okay, so what are the projects? What is Are those independent startups? What are those things? Yeah, so those are actually our long-term sustainability model. The projects we're building are going to become scaled-up companies. We don't want to be fundraising forever, right? So we want to put things out there that become revenue generating and scalable and potentially, transformative. And so while we know that we will have to stay in this mode for a while, Impact Africa Network should be sustainable in 8 to 10 years, right? And so, so it's a very, in my view, it's a very effective model. It can work if you look at all the kind of the structure, the mechanics, what you need to do, and the potential. It's doable. I'm not too sure about the cultural context, so I can't speak very specifically about what the cultural issues might be in the US that may make it a little bit challenging. Over here, my sense is we have some cultural dynamics that we can go into that make it very, very viable. Also, the cost of talent here at that level is so affordable, right? That you can, again, go so far. So it depends. So some of those things might come into play in terms of the cost of the whole model. So that's one of the advantages we have. We have a very low cost, I guess, talent base, if you will, at that very, very early stage, right? So we can go so far with so little in terms of funding.
Yeah, as I was poking around, the model and what you're trying to do, I mean, I was thinking, maybe it applies to high schoolers, maybe it applies to education. Like you said, it may apply to, maybe it applies to certain areas in the US and not others based on, cost and labor costs and things like that. But I looked at it and it's, do you think it applies to, below college? Like you're sort of in a fellowship model, right? So it's college folks.
Yeah, post-college, yeah, just right after college.
Would it work for a high school setting or, lower age people?
I would be very skeptical about, especially what we're doing, because what we're doing is we're building companies,
right?
And I'm replicating what I saw in Silicon Valley. So everybody in our organization has a specific role, and there's some, we have people who are learning to become product managers and engineers and folks who are software developers who are learning how to become good software developers in a structured environment, right? So there's so much of that, I would say, kind of like acquired knowledge that you would have to have, or at least be able to quickly get to, that I just think I would be very skeptical about, in general, saying most high schoolers, maybe in the US, maybe some high schools, I'm pretty sure they would be able to do it, right? Again, it's one of those things where, what are we talking about? What's the context? So I'm pretty sure it could work in the US in some areas, because, there are some really good schools over there, and there's some really, that happens. But over here, I would be like, wow, it would not be possible, just because of what it takes to get somebody from that deer in the headlights moment, right, to the point where they're productive. By the time you've done 4 years in school, if you're doing computer science at the University of Nairobi, you've been exposed to a few things, right? You know how to operate in the digital world, so to speak, right? And so it's not that big a gap, right? So high schooler, unless you are Bill Gates, where you are coding, at midnight, what are we going to do, right? It's a marginal case, right? And it will be an exception, not something that needs.
So it probably doesn't scale, basically.
Not at the high school level. For what we're doing, I would have to say it would be very, very, very challenging to do it at the high school level.
All right. So let's talk some of the projects. I mean, I saw your, kind of the 5-year goals, the 10-year goals. I guess, where are you placing your bets in terms of what do you see?
Yeah.
Like you have a bunch of projects in the pan and you got, plans.
Yeah. So we just launched our first commercial project. It's basically a STEM school focusing on data science and AI, starting there. So basically it's a Lambda for our market at the end of the day. There's a huge need for that in terms of next level, what I would call STEM talent development, professional talent development. So basically it's the same concept that Lambda has taken off with. And so we call it Jenga School. And that's one area where we see, I personally believe that Africa has a shot at becoming the engine room of STEM talent to the world. And so as the developing world is aging and there's more demand for STEM talent across the globe, where is that talent going to come from? right? And you're seeing remote work is becoming a thing that everybody's kind of like, okay, this is the new normal, right? And so I see that as a massive opportunity, right, for us to actually tap into. Another area is fintech, right? If you look at the financial services market here, we have legacy banks, and the population of the unbanked is so massive. And then we have a new generation that's coming online. Our Gen Z is huge, and so there is a very open opportunity to step in there and say, I'm going to create the financial services company for the future, right? And what does that look like in a digital world? So we're actually working on that project. Another project that we're really excited about is what we call, we have a huge diaspora, right? People who live in the US, probably a couple of 100,000 people, right? And a lot of them struggle, because I was one of those people, to just do things on the ground, like transactions here, buying land, completing a real estate project, or even just an errand, right? That might require somebody to actually walk it through, like some public sector office or something of that nature. So we're like, why don't we just do Upwork for here, right? But it's designed around the problems that those people face, because a lot of them have building projects that they want to execute, but there's no trust. They have to travel here to oversee the project, and they spend 2 weeks and 3 weeks just kind of babying their real estate project, because a lot of them that's kind of like their nest egg in a lot of ways. And so we see that as a massive opportunity to actually build an entire services model company around that just provides the trust and the oversight for these projects, and is a platform for enabling that. That's just a few things that we're excited about. And I mean, so you go from there, and there's healthcare, and so what we do is we just focus on what we believe we can execute quickly and get to at least that initial traction. But as long as we can see a significant opportunity, because on top of that, diaspora services company, we call it DAN International, there's a fintech opportunity on top of that. We don't know where that's going to go. We just know there's a significant amount of pain and a significant amount of pent up capital that's sitting on the sidelines, because there's no trust mediator in the middle to drive that. So yeah, those are some of the things that we're working on, and a bunch of others I could talk about.
And all these projects, the end markets and the revenue to support them, they're all basically local, right? Like it would be on continent would be enough to fund, the startup for a while, right?
Yeah, and the way we think about that is we think about, we're building businesses fundamentally, right? We understand, I understand very clearly that you need to you get to a point where you need to get funding so you can actually build the team that will take you to the next stage. So I understand how that process works, and I appreciate that. But we're not interested in this notion of unicorns or anything of that nature, right? We're going to be very pragmatic. We understand how the system works and what we need to do. When you look at the market opportunity, right? Africa has a huge diaspora across all the Balkan countries, right? Uganda, Tanzania, all of them have a diaspora, as an example of what I'm talking about. So once we build it here, how do we move into those markets? So it's a huge market, right? And so, but you just start with where you are and you execute what you can in your market. Right? Kenya is a country of 50 million people, oddly. And then Uganda, I think, has 48, and then Tanzania has 55, and then Ethiopia has, I think, 80 or something of that nature. So I think about our market as a regional play, right? But you have to prove it first in your local space and build something solid, and then now figure out how to scale. And here's what's happening. I know some founders here locally who are going through that process right now. They're actually scaling their startups into the region, into different markets. And we're all connected. I know them, they know me, and we're big. We know that's the move, and they have networks that they're building, and they're understanding those markets. And so we will tap into that knowledge and tap into those networks. So we'll ride on top of what has already been done. So it's kind of like thought out in that way. So the market is huge, the opportunity is massive. The problem is people want it to go as fast as it would go in the US. I don't think there's any market in the world, maybe China, right? That a product when you find product market fit can scale at the level at which it scales in the US. It's just unprecedented. And I argue this. Silicon Valley in its could only exist in the US because it had a huge backyard to sell into that did not have language barriers, regulatory barriers, or pretty standard, right? And markets were well known, right? And so I would say that, yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. The problem is people expect it to behave the same way as it would in the States. So when they put money in, they're expecting immediate similar results. It's not going to work that way, right? You're going to have to kind of, work your way into the market in a systematic way, and even find interesting funding models that you might just fund specific countries independently, right? Because you have to. So there are all kinds of different realities we're dealing with over here.
Either way, I mean, this is a fascinating project, and I hope you get all your donations and get you guys up to scale because it sounds fascinating. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is that the reason why I'm doing this is because a lot of times, what's my why? I really believe that we are at an inflection point where we have three things coming together at the same time. We have an abundance of young talent on the continent. We have innovation happening, and at the same time, we just have an aging population, right? That is kind of getting off stage. So the power structure is there's a power vacuum right now, and so innovation and entrepreneurship creates people who, when you're successful in that space, and it happens pretty quickly. In 10 years, you could have numbers of people who have built wealth, who have built influence, who can now step into the civic space and be incorruptible because they don't have to eat from the trough, if you will, right? And so I see this opportunity as an inflection point where in the next 10 years, if we play our cards right, our vision is to build 10 companies that provide 10,000 jobs that are valued at $10 billion. In that network of 10,000 people, there'll be those are the people who will become the heroes of society. They will start to shift the culture. They'll start to shift the narrative. They'll start to give other people a view of what success can look like. It can be done the right way. It doesn't have to be done through, a corrupt, political government structure, which is what most people here assume is the only way to make it financially. So I see that as a way to create a new narrative and to create new heroes in society. And once you do that, you can now start to shift our country and our continent, because there'll be people who have built their resources and their wealth. And what do they do next, right? They now are empowered. They are motivated to scale the impact beyond just themselves. And Impact Africa Network's vision, that's what we're doing. I'm fully focused on how do we not just build startups, how do we change our society? By building innovation leaders, launching companies that scale so that we can have the wealth and the resources to actually influence, and building community. And so we have a philosophy by which what we're doing. We're just not building people in a vacuum. We're engineering in them the thought process and the vision and the passion for changing the African narrative. So to me, innovation startups, they're a means to that end. To how do we change our society? How do we essentially provide a new narrative to people that you can do it if you do it the right way? Opportunity is accessible, is possible. So that's, I guess, what I would have to say about that.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Good stuff.
Thank you.